Hello, my name is Kaylin Towery, and the following presentation on the fall of the Roman Empire is for my History 1130 course taught by Dr. Laranta for second summer session 2016. I first wanted to talk a little bit about the brief history of Rome before the fall, just a short summary of it before we dive into the details on the fall. But anyways, the Roman Empire was such a large and extensive political and social structure in Western civilizations. The empire, it was so large that it had to divide into the East and the West, and it just was incredible how large and how powerful it had become. The first Roman Empire was ruled by Augustus Caesar, who you're looking at a picture of him right now. He became the emperor in 31 BC, and from there it spiraled out of control, growing and growing, and the influences that the Roman Empire left on Western civilization was insane. Its contributions in every aspect were, without a doubt, long lasting. They, from their inventions to ideas and the people that came out of that empire, it was incredible as to what they accomplished in the amount of time that they ruled. I want to start off showing you guys a map of the Roman Empire in 117 AD. And here you can see over off to the left side of the picture how far it stretched, like into what is now Spain, and how in the southern area it stretched into Africa. And it just was a massive, massive empire that had grown and grown over the years, and they dominated a lot of land in that area of the world. I wanted to show y'all this so that you could see the difference in this map and some other maps I'm going to show you a little later in the presentation. So now that we covered that, I wanted to talk about how the Roman Empire actually fell. First happened in 312 when Constantine became the emperor of the Roman Empire. He brought a lot of Christianity to the Roman Empire, which some people argue was not exactly compatible with the Roman beliefs. And then in 324 AD, the changing of the Roman Empire capital to Constantinople meant that the heart of the Roman Empire was no longer in Rome. And that was a huge shift for the people there. And then in 476 AD, this is the most agreed upon date for the fall of Rome. This was the end of the last Roman Empire in the West, and the Western Empire had technically been declining for years when the boy emperor, bear with me on the names, the Romulus Augustulus maybe, was overthrown. He was a Germanic soldier, actually took over and controlled what was once the Western Empire there. And then in 1453 AD, that was the date for the fall of Constantinople. And by this time, the Eastern Empire was not very Roman and had little in common with the early Roman Empire, actually, and that struck the final date of the emperor in the East. And now I want to talk a little bit about the military causes of the fall of the empire. And one of those main military causes were the Germanic attacks. That's where the Germanic tribes were able to invade the Roman Empire. And the constant attacks weakened the empire that was already falling to pieces a little bit. And one major thing to talk about there is the year 378 Battle of Adrianople. That's where the Visigoths defeated the Romans and gained control of the Western Empire. No military attacks were exactly supporting or protecting the Eastern Empire during that time, and that's when Western troops were launched. And also, Rome was preoccupied with Germanic attacks, left them a little bit vulnerable for other attacks in addition to that. going back to the Battle of Adrianople, that's where the Roman army was weakened and many soldiers ended up dying, and it was up to the Eastern Empire to defend the Roman Empire. And by 400 AD, attacks were coming in from the north, dividing and weakening the kingdom even further. So it was just constantly being crushed and crushed and crushed until it finally ended up falling. And now I want to talk a little bit about the economic causes of the fall of the Roman Empire, and that had a lot to do with the hereditary occupations. And in 332, occupations became hereditary by law and bound workers to the land. And although binding workers and their families to their fields and occupations improved the economy for a little bit, it really didn't last for that long. Production ended up declining, and people were pushed to the desert cities, and they in turn gave their allegiance to individual nobles, pulling support from the empire itself. And people were really upset about having to pay their taxes to the empire and being confined to their occupations. And so, like I said, production really just like declined quickly. Um, the commoners had a great chance of survival with the nobility, a greater chance of survival with the nobility than with the emperors. So people support individual nobles instead of their emperor. Another economic cause I want to talk about is high spending. Maintaining the army was very costly for the Roman Empire, and defending the borders as well. The army's loyalty had to be bought, and since the borders were constantly being attacked, by the military was constantly being funded, and this nearly bankrupted the empire's entire funds, basically. The people were paying taxes, but they weren't really seeing any results, and so the borders weren't any better protected, but the people were losing more and more money. And high taxes from the central government to support the emperor really took a toll on the people as well. And an additional economic cause was inflation. Currency had really become devalued. Emperors debased the currency by reducing the amount of precious metals in the coins. The public quickly figured out that they raised the prices on items to offset the debased money, because I mean they weren't dumb. So currency became basically worthless, and the economy had to revert to a barter system. And then, in addition to all that, bear with me on the names once again. Diocletian set price controls to try to stop inflation. And Diocletian had come into power in 284 and set maximum prices for items and commodities. And although this was meant to make items affordable and stop inflation, it really just led to the creation of a black market and sellers didn't obey the price controls, which just furthered the distrust of the government and commoners. And then price controls became irrelevant, essentially. Now on to social causes, and one of the first social causes was Christianity. Early Christians were being persecuted, but Christianity really just started to spread rapidly over the entire empire. And as people began converting rapidly to Christianity, after they rapidly began to convert to Christianity after the Edict of Milan and the conversion of Constantine. And the Edict of Milan, issued by Constantine, stopped the persecution of Christians and guaranteed freedom of worship to all. And Christians were really able to achieve more than non Christians, which led many people to converting, actually. And Constantine began moving the capital to the east, where Christianity was already very, very popular. And so that pulled power away from the Western Empire, which was already weakening. So it also highlighted the divide between the pagan West and the Christian East. So another social cause that we had was lack of faith in the government. This lack of trust in the central government made the commoners look elsewhere for protection. Um, they, the central government really couldn't protect the kingdom, which angered the commoners. They They ended up looking for employment and protection from raiders and government officials in the countryside because life just offered up no opportunities for protection. The shift from city to country was really the start of the entrance into the Middle Ages. And the lack of faith in the government and entering into individual agreements with landowners lessened support from the empire, which multiple landowners were receiving support from smaller groups of people. Um, instead of the entire empire giving allegiance to one single emperor. So the empire it really started to divide, and that's when the West and the East, the sections of the Roman Empire, uh, lost their united oneness that they had for so long. And now on to political causes. It really stemmed from inconsistent leadership where most emperors reigned for short periods of time before they were killed. And that quick change of leadership meant that it was really difficult for their people to give support to anyone. The leaders of the government changing so often meant that views and goals of the empire were truly unpredictable. The lack of consistent leadership meant that the empire just didn't have a clear plan of how to continue on. The high taxes levied by the empire were unmeetable, but it fell on town councilors to pay the difference from their own pockets if their state didn't meet the requirements. And due to the failing economy, the town councilors didn't have enough money to pay the difference, and some even ended up going into hiding over this. Just they were avoiding their civic duties during this time, and that really that wreaked havoc on the empire. And lack of innovation was truly an issue too. Most hard labor was done by the slaves. Even though the early empire was technologically advanced, very little technology was actually focused on labor saving machinery. And so the slaves had no reason to create labor saving technology because they still would have to have work, and the credit would all go to their masters regardless. And the upper class during this time really they viewed like the laborers were beneath them, and so there wasn't really any reason for them to create technology either because they didn't care about helping the slaves out any. And although they were advanced in some ways, like with their roads and aqueducts. They had no labor saving inventions, and the things that they produced through hard labor were what were essential for survival. By ignoring the labor, they were ignoring the needs of survival, and slave labor could not sustain a growing empire. So, in conclusion to all of that, the collapse of Rome was really not caused by one individual's action. The weakening and collapse of Rome occurred over a period of time, and there was a lot of theories and different ideas behind what truly caused the once strong and mighty and revered Roman Empire to collapse. And people still to this day debate over what exactly happened, but we may never really know. We can talk about it, and we all can form our own opinions on it. But ultimately, I think it was a collection of things that led to the final fall of the empire. And of course, here you can see the sources that we used for all of this information that was in our presentation. So thank you for watching, and I hope that you learned a little bit more actually, about the Roman Empire and its collapse. Thank you.